Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really jumping into something fascinating. We're exploring ancient military assessment, even psychology, through, well, through specific verses from the
Yeah,
Gita.
exactly.
And these sources, they give us this really direct, almost unfiltered glimpse into a commander's strategic thinking,
Right.
right on the edge of this huge conflict, between the Kauravas and the Pandavas.
It's quite stark.
Yeah, and what's kind of surprising is how some of these, well, ancient observations, they sort of echo modern leadership challenges in ways you might not expect.
That's right. So our mission, if you like, for this deep dive is to pull out those insights. How is strength seen? Leadership, morale. How are these things talked about at, well, within the story, a really crucial moment?
Hmm.
These verses, they just offer such a unique window into the psychology of it all.
Okay, so the first thing the commander does, right, is size up the enemy, the Kauravas.
Mm,
And our source material, verse 8, it jumps right in. It names names.
specific names.
It lists Sindrona, Bhishma, Karna, Kripa, Ashvatthama, Vikarna, and Burishrava, the son of Somadatta. Now, what's striking, I think, isn't just the list itself. It's how it specifically calls out Kripa as victorious in war.
That detail is significant.
It feels like more than just reading off a roster,
Yeah.
It's like a deliberate spotlight on individual power.
Yeah.
What's that tell us? I mean, about how ancient warfare saw its heroes and why focus on these guys right at the start?
Well, what's fascinating here is exactly that it's not a general statement. It's a deliberate highlighting of specific, really powerful individuals.
The heavy hitters.
Precisely. These are the strategic linchpins, right? The figures whose very presence could potentially sway morale, maybe even turn a battle. So this focus on named powerful individuals, it reveals something fundamental about ancient warfare, I think. This belief that individual champions, their skill, their reputation, that was paramount to the strength of the whole force.
Right.
They weren't just soldiers. They were, embodiments of martial skill. Icons, almost.
That's a really strong point about individual impact. Makes you wonder, how does that ancient focus on, like, named heroes stack up against, say, a modern tech company hunting for star engineers? Or a sports team going after a franchise player? Is it just skill? Or is there that psychological ripple effect, too?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about any modern organization. A few highly visible, maybe exceptional individuals, they often define the perceived strength of the whole group, don't they?
Yeah, totally.
Their reputation alone can, well, it can intimidate an opponent or really galvanize their own team. This verse shows us that using individual prowess for psychological leverage, that's an ancient idea. It endures.
And it's not just the generals, right? Because beyond these named heroes, the commander then looks at the wider army. Verse 9 mentions many other heroes prepared to lay down their lives for the cause.
The rank and file.
And crucially, it points out their collective skill, too. It says they are well-armed and skilled in the art of war.
Perfect.
That phrase, though, prepared to lay down their lives.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredibly powerful, isn't it? What does that level of commitment suggest about the collective morale, the dedication of the troops beyond just the famous elites?
Well, this raises an important question, doesn't it, about how collective will factors into a military assessment. So while the names in verse 8, they represent that sort of concentrated power, verse 9 broadens things out. It looks at the sheer numbers, yes, but maybe more importantly, the unified intent of the troops.
The commitment.
Exactly. It implies that, okay, beyond the famous generals, this army is deeply committed. They're competent across the board. And this collective readiness, this willingness to sacrifice, that's a critical piece of perceived strength. It points to a unified, really formidable force ready for battle.
Okay, so we've got the individual stars, the committed troops. Now, this leads us to a really crucial bit, the comparative assessment.
Yes, the contrast.
Verse 10. It sets up this really striking contrast. It describes the Kaurava army, the one they're facing, as protected by Bhishma. And here's the key word, unlimited, or aparaipan in Sanskrit.
Unlimited. Powerful word.
But then it describes the Pandav army, their own side, as protected by Bhima and calls it limited. Pareptak. So what's going on here? What's the significance of these words, unlimited versus limited? And why pick Bhishma and Bhima as the protectors for this comparison?
Right. This is where the psychological framing gets, well, incredibly interesting. The implication of unlimited for the Kauravas, it's probably not just about literal numbers, though that could be part of it.
Okay.
It speaks more perhaps to a perception of overwhelming strength, maybe inexhaustible resources, maybe sky-high morale, or even, a sense of destiny or divine favor. It's a psychological declaration of immense power.
Like an aura of invincibility.
Something like that. And conversely, limited for the Pandavas. That doesn't automatically mean weakness. But it is a comparative thing, an assessment of perceived constraints. Maybe fewer numbers, yes, or less equipment, or maybe a trickier strategic position.
Okay, that makes sense. And the protectors. Bhishma versus Bhima.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
having Bhishma as the protector, well, he embodies tradition, wisdom, immense power, that kind of unwavering, stabilizing force, that projects unlimited potential, doesn't it?
Yeah, I see that.
Bhima, on the other hand, is pure power, incredible courage, absolutely, but may be seen as more raw strength, perhaps less strategic depth compared to Bhishma.
So the choice of protector reinforces the unlimited perception.
Exactly. This psychological framing of strength and limitation, it deeply influences the commander's own confidence,
Yeah.
and the troops' morale and the whole strategic outlook for the battle. It shapes how they see their odds.
That idea of unlimited versus limited being about perception more than just raw numbers, that's really insightful. It makes me think about, I don't know, a business pitch.
Go on.
Like, if you frame your team or your tech as having unlimited capability, even if there are objective limits, that psychological framing could seriously boost investor confidence, right?
Precisely.
Or think about a project manager talking about their team. If they genuinely believe and communicate that the team's potential is, in a way, unlimited, it must shift how they approach challenges.
Absolutely. It highlights that perception of resources or potential can often be more powerful than the objective facts on the ground. A leader's belief and how they communicate that belief about their own side's unlimited potential or an opponent's limited scope that directly impacts strategy, morale, and, ultimately outcomes, whether you're on a battlefield or, like you said, in a boardroom.
So, just to wrap up our deep dive today,
Meh.
we've only looked at 3 verses from the Gita, really, just 3. But wow, they offered so much.
They really did.
We saw that detailed list of key heroes, the recognition of collective might and dedication in the troops, and then this fascinating, really subjective assessment of forces as unlimited versus limited. It's kind of amazing how much is packed in there.
Indeed. And it leaves us, and maybe you listening, with a pretty profound question to chew on, I think.
Yeah.
How much of actual strength, in anything we do really comes down to the objective numbers, the tangible resources, versus the conviction, the perception of the people involved.
Perception versus reality.
Right. And how do those initial assessments we make, those deep-seated beliefs about whether our own resources, our own potential feel unlimited or limited, how does that fundamentally shape how we approach challenges and maybe even shape our confidence in overcoming them? Something to think about.